Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. My name is Dr. Chhoda, and welcome to our channel. Folks, federal aid is failing. All the trillions of dollars in federal aid is actually failing to help those who need it the most. Welcome to our channel, everyone. My name is Dr. Chhoda. This right here is a little bit of information about me. You'll learn more about who I am, what my journey has been like, and why you should listen to me. Here's a headline of an article on your screen from Bloomberg. Federal aid is failing to reach renters as eviction ruling looms. Now, folks, I'll give you my analysis of this at a high level before I give you the news. Unfortunately, many people have taken advantage of the system. I'm not just talking of people who took out EIDL loans when their businesses didn't need money. I'm not simply talking about businesses that got paycheck protection program money and then never hired back employees. I'm not talking about individuals who made more than $100,000 a year, who got stimulus checks, who are now getting the child tax credit. I'm not talking about those, although that is part of this equation. Unfortunately, a significant amount of the money that was allocated did not reach those who need help the most. Now, we have talked about unemployment benefits extensively on our channel, and I'll continue to do that. But I do want to make this channel about a broader picture of our country, because this channel, the Ignition Time channel, is about the country, the economy, as well as our money. So what is happening and why is it happening? Let's first examine why things are happening, why we have a situation where the money is actually not helping those who need help the most. In one word, bureaucracy. Yes, folks, bureaucracy. Even though the federal government sends out the money, it is inefficiency in communication between the state and local governments and the federal government. That's one problem. The second problem is state and local governments themselves are inefficient. In fact, here's a quote from Bloomberg. State and local governments continued to struggle to disburse emergency rental assistance in July, despite ramped up efforts from the Biden administration to expedite payments. Just $1.7 billion was released last month. The total is $5.1 billion out of $46.5 billion that was appropriated by Congress to prevent evictions during the pandemic. This is extremely surprising. In fact, the White House released a fact sheet outlining new guidance. They're trying to help state and local authorities, and they want to speed up the process. In fact, they are telling authorities that they can rely on what's called as self-attestation during this emergency to declare an applicant eligible for assistance. In other words, if you say, hey, I self-attest that I have some financial difficulty, that will allow you to get financial assistance, whether you're a landlord or whether you are a renter. Now, states have been working round the clock to speed up the delivery of all this money before the moratorium on evictions is ruled on by the Supreme Court. In fact, the Biden administration has urged the Supreme Court to keep in place a moratorium that is being challenged by landlords and real estate trade associations across the country, including Alabama and Georgia. And a lot of justices have already indicated that they're going to be skeptical of the administration's arguments. In other words, this moratorium on rental assistance is going to come to an end. In fact, the court did leave intact a previous moratorium that was enacted by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control in June, but Justice Brett Kavanaugh said in casting the vote that congressional authorization would be required for any further extension. In other words, if the eviction moratorium has to be extended any further, it's going to need approval from the House and the Senate. And that, I want our viewers and subscribers to know, is very, very, very unlikely despite the Delta variant, because the Republicans are not going to support it. So what does all of this mean, folks? What is the bottom line? The bottom line is that, unfortunately, trillions of dollars in federal aid that was sent out, that has indeed made its way through the system, that has indeed propped up the U.S. economy. Out of those trillions of dollars, a significant portion, tens of billions of dollars, have not reached those who need help the most. I'm not just talking about individuals who need help as far as the eviction crisis is concerned. By the way, this includes both renters and landlords, because there are a lot of landlords who have maybe two rental properties and they depend on rental income from those two rental properties to be able to pay their own bills. More importantly, there are tenants who simply can't afford to pay rent. The tenants and also the landlords should be getting help from the federal government, specifically when $56 billion was allocated by the federal government for this specific purpose. And unfortunately, as you saw at the start of this episode of Ignition Time, only about $5.5 billion of this money was indeed allocated. This means there's a significant amount of money out there that was allocated by the government that has not made its way to those who need help the most. And this is also a major problem, a major issue, if you will, a bug, if you will, within the unemployment benefit system. Because first of all, the unemployment benefit system failed millions of our fellow Americans. Secondly, the unemployment benefit system was never geared to meet this kind of unexpected, unprecedented demand as a result of the pandemic. Remember, the unemployment benefit system was set up in the 1930s. And there are many states who have not updated the software of their unemployment benefit systems for over 50 years. Yes, that's right, over 50 years. You know exactly what I'm talking about when you go to the unemployment benefit system website of your state. This, in the country that gave birth to Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Tesla. Pretty unbelievable that those who need help the most should not get it, not only because of outdated systems, but also the bureaucracy, the delay in communication between the federal government and the state and local governments. That's one major problem. And the second problem is the inefficiency from state and local governments, which, by the way, is what has forced the White House to issue a directive, to issue an outline, if you will, saying, hey, this is the way you should be sending out money. This is the way that you should be dispersing all this money for rental assistance to tenants as well as landlords. Because at the end of the day, folks, the unfortunate reality is that those who need help the most are not getting it, and the rich are doing just fine. In fact, there are landlords who own 40, 50, 60 houses. They really don't care. It doesn't make a difference to them if a few of their tenants don't make rent. But they still proceed with eviction because they can do so and they have the right to do so. It really depends on the state in which you're living. I know for a fact that there are many states like Tennessee, like Arkansas, and like Mississippi, where there are judges who are overruling the CDC guidelines and saying, hey, if the tenant doesn't pay rent, they must be evicted, because local judges do have the flexibility to be able to do something like that. This is really a complex situation and it is evolving in different parts of the country. What I told you in this episode of Ignition Time was a high-level overview of the discrepancy between the intentions of the federal government, between the law that was enacted by Congress, and the actual execution of that intention. In other words, giving money to tenants and landlords at the state and local level, which is further compounded, further complicated by local judges in eviction court. Let me know what you're experiencing as a direct result of this and where you are located. Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with Ignition Time. We work hard on this channel to bring you the latest news. Please click the like button. Please click subscribe. Please enable notifications. I appreciate you. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.